Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Avatar discussion topic video. So in this one I want to once again talk about the 2026 Aang movie, but this time specifically sort of when we go into next year, when should we be looking for information? Because it's not going to be as simple as we hit 2025 and then all of a sudden it's just announcement after an announcement after an announcement. No, it is a movie, so it is going to be done in a somewhat sort of standard, structured approach to how they slowly roll out a lot of the key steps along the way. So what I'm going to do here in the video, as you can see on screen, is I'm going to use two of Paramount's previous franchise movies, Transformers 1 and then also the upcoming Sonic 3, to kind of go through the dates on when did key points during their kind of marketing cycle happen and how we can compare that to Avatar, which is effectively like in or around like a year behind both of these movies basically. So and I think this makes sense because obviously we have the Transformers franchise, Sonic franchise, and the Aang movie is of course the Avatar franchise. Obviously slightly different, where Transformers 1 is an animated movie, of course. Basically it's just like Avatar except it's in like kind of CG animation. Sonic is a live action movie but also is, you know, quite heavily utilizing CG, and they seem to be leaning more and more into focus on the CG characters over the humans, but we'll see what happens there. So of course we know the Aang movie does currently have a release date. It is January 20th, 2026, which I think is an interesting one just because, of course, the Sonic movie is December 20th, 2024. So we're sort of like a year and a month kind of offset from Sonic. And then, of course, Transformers 1 came out September 20th. So it highlights that Paramount seems to like the 20th of the month release dates, which is kind of interesting. So let's kind of go through this. So what I have here on the list is sort of the idea of a title reveal, if there is something to reveal there, a logo reveal as like an initial teaser style thing, a clear trailer number 1, a clear trailer number 2, and we've seen this quite clearly with Sonic and Transformers. They literally have things called trailer 1 and trailer 2. Now, of course, both of these movies also have a lot of like TV ad spots that have a variety of different pieces of footage in them, but the main trailers are the big things that we're talking about in terms of kind of really marketing points along the marketing cycle for these movies. So Transformers 1, let's kind of go through this here. So of course, again, it came out September this year. I think it was slightly delayed in some countries, and it was more like October. Like for me, it was like I think like in middle of October when it came out here in Ireland. But either way, it initially came out in most places in September. So obviously, much earlier on, they confirmed the title back in I think it was April 2023. And again, this is a completely different avenue of Transformers. It's basically its own continuity. It's not really related to any other Transformers media. This is the kind of start of its own thing. No idea if they're going to do a sequel, but, you know, obviously there was a big cast involved in this one, that sort of thing. The logo reveal for Transformers 1 happened on April 11th, 2024. So obviously you get the idea here. 4th month of the year, and then in the 9th month of the year, like kind of 5 months later, that's when they revealed this. The trailer 1 happened very shortly after the initial logo reveal, just like a week later. We then had to wait until July for trailer number 2, and then the movie came out a couple months later in September. So you can see most of the marketing cycle for this movie happened within the kind of 5-6 month kind of time period. Now, of course, there was other news along the way. Transformers especially is known as being a toy brand as well. So there was, of course, news if you were in the Transformers fandom about a lot of the merchandise surrounding this movie that also was happening in the lead up to April and the kind of months just kind of before that as well. But most of the big stuff happened from April to September, of course. With Sonic 3, which of course is out in just a few weeks, they had the logo reveal for this February 2nd, 2024, though I think they had a more basic initial logo, again, sort of like the year before, I think. But the one that I think they finalized was in February this year. So that is an interesting one when you talk about Avatar. We also don't have a logo for the Avatar movie. So, you know, December and then all the way back to February, so like 10 months beforehand. That's quite interesting. Nearly 11 months because of the offset here. So this is definitely something for like the Aang movie that we'd be maybe looking towards, is that both of these things could happen relatively early in the year. They won't be obviously the most significant details, but they are still things that we actually need. Sonic 3, after a lot of waiting, a lot of people were worried that the movie was going to get delayed because they had waited so long to start the marketing push here. So it should be noted that the marketing push for this movie happened a little maybe later than most people expected. But in August, the 27th, 2024, they put out trailer 1. Trailer 2, of course, came out just a few days ago, November 25th, ahead of the December release, of course. So you can see the idea here roughly is that the trailer 2 is like a month or two before the release, and then in this case here, trailer 1 was more like, what, 4 months before release. So once again highlighting the 4, 5, maybe 6 month kind of release schedule that we're kind of talking about here. So then we go into more directly talking about the Aang movie. Again, we don't have a direct title reveal. Of course, we have stuff like recent information says it's called like Aang the Last Airbender, and then Lost Realms is the copyright listing for this movie. This is what it's titled as. Now, I think most fans don't think the movie's actually going to be called Aang the Last Airbender just on its own, or just Lost Realms on its own. But it's likely going to be some combination of all of these things, maybe even including like Avatar Legends or something like that in here as well. But the movie does need an official title. The one that they've been quite vocal about in terms of like some of the news stuff that's come out about this movie was Aang the Last Airbender. This is what was attached to like the cast announcement stuff that we did get a couple of months ago. But again, it should be noted that there really hasn't been that much public information that's really taken off about this movie, so they still have an official title reveal to do. Same goes for the logo. We technically have an image related to this movie, but again, it came out from CinemaCon 2023, and we weren't meant to get it, so it sort of leaked out kind of accidentally, and at least has given us an idea of what's going on, but I wouldn't say that that necessarily comes across quite clearly as like this is the teaser poster or anything like that for the movie. It didn't have a title or a logo on it. So these two things do have to happen side by side, because unlike, for instance, Sonic 3, where I think we just knew after the second movie was called Sonic 2, the third movie was obviously just going to be called Sonic 3. They're not doing taglines. They don't need to do anything there. Whereas the relaunch of the Avatar franchise in animation, the first Avatar Studios project, it's important they get the titling and the kind of franchise kind of wording, marketing correct to make it clear what they're doing for this and for future projects as well. So I think this is why we still don't have a finalized kind of title / logo, because depending on what way they do the title, it could change what the logo type stuff is going forward. Because of course, if you look at a lot of Avatar stuff these days, we have our kind of main logo, which is sort of like the it's the word Avatar, but now it has the kind of 4 symbols over the top. But then that changes, of course, because like Legend of Korra has its own symbol. Are they going to do something different here where it's just an individual movie title, or will it incorporate some sort of a new logo, an Avatar Studios logo or something like that? This is the interesting stuff that we have to see. I'll get into some of the big events that are coming up now, but just to get across the idea, these are two things that my assumption would be if the movie keeps this date for like multiple months going into next year, then yes, we should be getting the reveal of the title and the logo probably within the first couple of months of 2025. Like, we shouldn't be too far away from this. So first kind of really clear information about this. Trailer 1 is obviously going to be probably the most significant point along the marketing cycle for the movie, because it's going to be the first time us seeing the animation in motion. And even though maybe by this time other news might come out that kind of highlights bits and pieces along the way, because again, these are the main things, stuff is going to be happening in the background. There is an Avatar merchandise line happening in 2025. We don't know how the movie ties into that versus just the franchise in general, but I'm assuming, given that it's a quite big merchandising deal with Jazzwares, the idea is that it's meant to be the entire franchise, and that it leaves an opening for them to do merch related to the movie. I can't see them missing out on that opportunity. We saw news reports from much earlier on this year that Paramount do view Avatar as being a big franchise for them, and they want to get the toy line out there to match up with, say, what like a TMNT is able to do with its merchandise line. So that makes a lot of sense. So trailer 1 is going to be a key thing, and again, based on previous kind of information, it should be somewhere in the maybe 4 month region, kind of ahead of the movie's launch. Trailer 2, of course, is going to be much more of a lead in to release, so probably not until maybe November/December, leading into January 2026. And then, of course, there will be ad spots along the way. Pretty much, I'm assuming once trailer 1 hits and we get a little bit closer, all that stuff is going to definitely start to happen. So, how does this then coincide with other big events that are happening in the year? The big three for, I think, potential stuff for Avatar is these three. So we have CinemaCon 2025, San Diego Comic-Con, SDCC 2025, and then New York Comic-Con 2025, NYCC. So CinemaCon this year is end of March, very early April. It's obviously like a 4-day event. San Diego Comic-Con is its usual late July slot. This time it's the 24th to the 27th for 2025. And then New York Comic-Con, as ever, is in October. This time out the 9th to the 12th. So you could sort of see the idea here is that, like, okay, CinemaCon is going to mark sort of this interesting point where we're like 9-ish months before the movie, which again, I think should be a decent time for maybe stuff like this. At the very least, if we don't know already, news from CinemaCon should hopefully confirm to us what the movie is actually called. There probably will be descriptions of some sort of a trailer that they did show at CinemaCon, because that's what they're going to have to do in this year, is they're going to have to show this movie to a certain degree to people at these events to hype up that it's actually coming out, all the industry style stuff. CinemaCon is a usually behind closed doors event, mostly for industry people. So a lot of visual stuff doesn't happen unless they kind of have just decided to sort of maybe like debut a trailer at CinemaCon, but then they like launch it like publicly as well. But if they do show any sort of like image type stuff or just stuff to the crowds, we are likely not going to see that. But typically the people who attend are allowed to sort of like describe what they saw. So there will be some sort of a report, is my guess, coming out of CinemaCon that will give us at least some decent information on the movie. But again, my assumption would be that by the time we get to March, April, we're probably in a position where we know a little bit more than we did like currently about the movie. The big one, though, is definitely going to be San Diego Comic-Con. So I'll highlight this here. San Diego Comic-Con obviously is in July. That means it's like exactly kind of 6 months before the January release. Comic-Con typically for Avatar has been the big event where they do a lot of Avatar reveals. We're put in a slightly different position here because this is a movie and not a show. So will they just debut a trailer here or not? I'm not sure. But either way, the idea should be, hopefully, that a trailer is either hitting at Comic-Con or shortly afterwards, or maybe we've already seen it leading into the convention, but we're expecting them to talk about it. For sure, I think we do go into Comic-Con expecting there to be an Avatar Studios panel, not just a publishing panel going over like comics and novels and stuff like that. They kind of need to have a full-on Avatar Studios panel because they of course need to talk about the movie and probably show off character designs, concept art, but they also need to announce the first series as well. Because Avatar Studios is doing movies, but it's also doing animated series as well. And that has been one of the very weird things, in a way, as we get to the end of the year, is that outside of rumors, there's been no official information about, like, that has specifics about the first series. We know they're working on a series, and series are part of the project, but there's actually no concrete information out there officially about the first series. So Avatar Studios need to a certain degree, give a little bit of an update on just what the plan is, what the first couple of projects are, what their slate to a certain degree actually is, and hopefully at this time they are coinciding this with a lot of other stuff happening in the franchise at the same time. Because in 2025 we are expecting, of course, marketing for Avatar Studios stuff, especially the Aang movie, to ramp up. We're expecting publishing to ramp up as well. July will mark the point at which, like, some of the newer books that we already knew about are beginning to come out, especially the first kind of kids novel, the Bending Academy book. And it means that probably the stuff coming out after this, the books set for after July, are going to be slightly kind of different than maybe we think. We still don't know the full scope of what this is in terms of, like, are we getting new comics, different novels, are we just talking about like tie-in stuff, or for instance, like, is Dark Horse going to be allowed to do sort of like almost like prequel comics or something like that leading into, for instance, the Aang movie? There's a lot of that stuff that could be happening here. So Comic-Con also has the option to do a lot of that Avatar Studios stuff as well, where they're going to have publishing stuff to talk about at the same time as hopefully animation, finally the communication they're allowed to do, plus video game stuff as well. There's a lot of video game projects in the works. Obviously the big one is still quite a while away. I don't think we're going to get that many updates on that 2025, but you know, there's stuff happening for sure. New York Comic Con, it's in October, so it feels like it's for like trailer 2, it's probably a little bit too early. Avatar typically, when it's active, does do both conventions, so like there would be an expectation that there probably should be a big Avatar panel, not just a publishing one once again. But a lot depends on what they have, what we know at the time. That, like, for instance, if they do decide to maybe focus the first panel only on the movie, I think by the time we get to October and we're just a couple of months away from the movie, we probably would expect an Avatar panel to cover for sure what the next project is, and cover like the kind of future beyond that, if they're trying to keep people kind of up to speed in what's going on. Again, maybe they have images of specific characters they might be able to reveal here, but October feels a bit early for a potentially January release, so we'd probably be looking at the month following that or the month afterwards for the proper updates to actually hit on the movie. But definitely by the time we're here, like, we're in the marketing cycle. Like, that's the thing. The second we hit SDCC, we should be with stuff like that. I'm assuming the merchandise line will probably be out at this point, unless something has changed, and we'll know a lot more about what the Avatar plan is. Because there's other stuff that we're expecting to happen. Like, there is the official Avatar Studios website. I'm assuming that has to be updated at a certain point. I'm also assuming that the social media's accounts are going to have to evolve a little bit at some point next year to change from being mostly a kind of ATLA kind of clip farm type thing to actually being a source of news about an upcoming project. That they can't just call those the Avatar The Last Airbender accounts. You kind of have to switch those to be Avatar Studios accounts, or you know, specifically aimed at the movie when you finally put out a title for it. So all that stuff is cool. And then also, if Paramount themselves do decide to do any big events, like an investors event, which they haven't really done, or at least in a consistent fashion, in the last couple of years. Because of course it was at the Paramount Investors event February 2021 where Avatar Studios was announced for the first time, but I think outside of they did one in 2022, I don't think we've seen the equivalent event really happen in the years since. So it's always hard to judge when exactly this stuff happens, but just it's one of those things where there is the potential for, like, obviously CinemaCon and events that are similar to CinemaCon potentially maybe done by Paramount, events that Paramount attend, that sort of idea here. So that's basically everything I wanted to sort of like cover here. It's just to kind of highlight, expectations going into the year. Of course, I'll be talking about this sort of stuff a little bit more in the 2025 preview video coming out at the end of the year, previewing the full year in Avatar for 2025. But this gives you a sense for, these are the events we're looking towards, and these are the things that we are like hoping to accomplish at many of these events. And this matches up with the way Paramount has done their other franchise movies, roughly, basically. Sonic seems like it was maybe slightly delayed getting its maybe trailer out to a certain degree. Like, will they be that late with this movie? I don't think so, because I think this is where we highlight the difference between this being the second sequel. It's Sonic 3, super well-known thing. To a certain degree, they didn't need to market it until much closer to the release. But with it being the relaunch of the Avatar franchise, they kind of do need to get the word out a little bit earlier, while also doing heavy marketing closer to release. So in the comments, let me know what your thoughts are. What are your expectations for a lot of these things? When do you think we'll get stuff like the official title reveal, the logo reveal? When will we get trailer 1, trailer 2? Do you think this release date is going to hold for most of the year overall? My thoughts on it are that I think for the most part the movie is done being, I think, heavily delayed. I can see the release date getting slightly adjusted just to get it out of the way of other movies which might get delayed. So I wouldn't be surprised to maybe see this slip back a little bit, but I still think we are probably talking about like early 2026 for this movie, and that yes, adjustments will literally just be to avoid potentially like Paramount having multiple movies hitting like super close together, or just to get out of the way of something else. But I do think mostly all the sort of I talked about here will be kind of pretty much in line, just in the same way, like adjusted by maybe a couple of weeks overall. So yeah, your thoughts on all this stuff. Which of these events do you think is actually going to deliver versus, I suppose, how much of this is just going to be social media announcements? Because that's my thing, is that, like, for instance, Avatar doesn't have an official, like, Twitter account anywhere. So, of course, the Paramount page is going to, like, post the Avatar trailer, but, like, they need to get an Avatar Studios Twitter account in my mind, and it's kind of weird that they don't have it. So, let me know your thoughts on that below, but that has been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.